Welcome to the Healthcare Plus podcast, hosted by Quint Studer and Dan Collard. I'm Nicole Webb-Bodie, partner at Healthcare Plus Solutions Group. Thank you for joining us as we bring together leaders and changemakers from across the healthcare industry. In each high-impact segment, you'll hear about the latest challenges organizations are facing and learn how guests are rewiring solutions to drive real change. Plus, you'll walk away from each episode with practical tools, techniques, and best practices to implement in your own role and in your organization. For more information on your host or to listen to recent episodes of the podcast, please visit www.healthcareplussg.com/podcast. Now, I'm pleased to welcome today's host, Dan Collard, who will introduce you to our next guest.
Well, hey, everybody, this is Dan Collard from Healthcare Plus Solutions Group, HPSG for short. And I am welcoming today a guest that I have been looking forward to talking to since March. And I'll tell you why since March here in just a bit. But I'm welcoming Corrin McCloskey from Tanner Health down in Georgia. Corrin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's such a joy to be here. I've really enjoyed getting to know you and this podcast. It's really a pleasure. Thanks for
Well,
having
and
me.
we're going to tell our audience how this came to be here in just a second or two. But first of all, let's let the podcast audience learn more about Corrin.
Sure. So, hi, everyone. My name's Corrin McCloskey. I'm the Vice President for Heart and Vascular and Oncology Services at Tanner Health in Carrollton, Georgia. Go Dogs. I got my red on today. But I'm just, I've been in healthcare for about 15 years as an administrative leader. My background really is in strategy, business development. I have a special interest in culture and physician leadership. I have a background in executive coaching as well. And just, my passion is helping us provide better healthcare by developing better teams and better leaders. And I've had such an incredible opportunity to share some of that along the way. And I'm looking forward to talking more with you about that today, Dan.
Yeah, well, and everything you just mentioned really is sort of the whole ball of wax. It's why I was so interested in having you on the podcast. So for the audience's sake, back in March, we were down at the American College of Healthcare Executives Annual Congress in Houston, Texas. And I've always been one of those guys, you see a lot of folks when they go to these large conferences, sometimes they just have to schedule their flights out maybe a little early on the very last day. And, I always like to stick around to the very end. And so it was the very last session on the very last day, but it was the topic, it was the title of the conference or of the session. And I thought, I've got to go to this. And so I go to this session, and there is Corrin joined by her two colleagues, Josh and Terry from Tanner Health. And I got to tell you, I can't tell you how many folks I've said, gosh, I'm so glad I waited and stayed for the very last session, because it was, in my humblest opinion, one of the very best sessions of all of
Thank you.
Congress, especially when it comes
Wow.
to the essence of leadership and the essence of culture. And I'm just so glad I stayed. And by the way, I had the chance to share that same sentiment with the ACHE folks, saying, hey, if the Tanner folks come back next year, don't wait to put them to the very last one on the very last day. They need prime time coverage here as well. And so that's kind of where I'd like to start, if you don't mind. Your presentation with your colleagues, Josh and Terry, that day focused on belonging, which is a word that we've really been surfacing up for the last couple of years, but belonging and leading in a new culture. So what about these new folks that come on as leaders into an organization, or maybe they're already in the organization and they ascend to a leadership position? Why do you think this topic resonates so strongly with healthcare leaders right now?
Yeah, thanks, Dan, for that question. This is the public service announcement to not to skip out early on the last sessions of the conference, right? And we as the presenters were kind of thinking, oh my gosh, it might be almost an empty room. We were so pleasantly surprised by the crowd that we had, and I think that's because this is a topic that people are really connecting with. And so I think, the topic being how to lead and belong in a new culture. My two colleagues and myself, we had been new at Tanner Health. We all three had gotten there in about a 2-year span. And so when we presented the topic to ACHE, it was we're all new leaders. We're coming into this community healthcare system that has its own unique culture, just like any organization. So, what did we do that allowed us to be successful in getting into that culture and growing as leaders and helping our organization be successful? So, we had a little fun with it. As you'll remember, we presented it as plays, right? Plays, your new leader playbook. And so we went through a couple different um, kind of what we believed were true tenets of what made us successful as new leaders belonging in a new culture. And I think this is so important because we all know that change in healthcare right now is so rapid, it's inevitable. In fact, the American College of Healthcare Executives came out with the statistic that the average tenure for a CEO in healthcare is 3.8 years. So, just by that statistic alone, we're seeing rapid change in organizational direction and leadership. So, really, we are trying to belong in new cultures. The cultures are changing as well as the leadership structure. And so, all of us need to develop those skills as administrative leaders and professionals in healthcare on how to learn to belong in new teams and new organizations.
You know what had me thinking during the conference, because we've spent a lot of time at HPSG over the last couple of years since the book The Human Margin: Building the Foundations of Trust came out with Quint Studer and Catherine Meese, and that's really where we saw the data supporting this essence of the need to create a sense of belonging. But most of that is focused on the frontline employee. And what had me thinking in your presentation was you really elevated that to a conversation around the sense of belonging for a leader. And then in your presentation, what really stood out was the connection between belonging and not just the feel good piece of it, but leader effectiveness, if you will. How do you see those two things being connected?
I think that you can't have one without the other, right? I think we've all had those managers or leaders in our organizations that you felt like were so disconnected from what was happening. And then they're less effective in leading the team, right? And this doesn't have to be feel good, hang out outside of work all the time or buddy buddy. And I think sometimes there is that fear from a leader of like, oh, well, I need to keep some sense of separation. This is not a soft belonging, hang out type of thing. This is, does my team trust me? Do I understand their day to day? Are we connected in the work that we're doing? Or are we so separated by our day to day work and by our day to day focus that we're not connecting? So, belonging, I think, really boils down to there's a sense of trust, there's a sense of connection and understanding. And you cannot be successful as a leader or as an organization if you don't hardwire those things into your culture. Because we all know strategy is not going to be effective in a broken culture. And I think often we try to start with the strategy. This is the goal. This is where we're going. But there's missing that foundation of trust and belonging that so many leaders need to develop as a skill.
Well, and I think it also leads to a sense of confidence, because if I feel like I belong, if I feel like I can trust and be trusted there, it seems like that just gives me the confidence. And I sort of saw that bear out in yours and Josh's and Terry's comments there. You know, three, albeit probably younger than average leaders in an organization. And your sense of confidence just was one of the again, is one of those things that drew me to want to stay for the whole session there.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. And Josh and Terry are both phenomenal leaders, and I have so much respect for how they've led their teams. And I think what you saw is what you got, right? We are all up there just speaking from our own experience, and I think it takes that level of comfort and confidence in your own skin to then be able to help build that on your team. That idea of safety and we're here doing the work with you and we're going to make mistakes, but we're inviting you into this trusting relationship, and that makes a huge difference. I think not just for the leader or for their team, but I would just encourage anyone that's listening, if you're doing this healthcare leadership thing alone, you don't have to, right? Go find colleagues. Like, I'm so fortunate to have like Josh and Terry and make sure that you feel like you have some belonging even just within your peers.
That was actually something I was gonna observe, not necessarily a question, but an observation, and I'd invite your feedback on it as well. Knowing that Terry in a nursing leadership role, Josh in some of those ancillary and support department leadership role, you as a service line leader there. What became abundantly apparent there is you guys actually like each other, you get along, and, one of the things that we see all the time is the emergence of this word silo. And if
Mm.
there's anything that is a barrier to trust and potentially belonging, it's these silos that just for some reason still exist in the industry. It seems like the playbook that you all talked about and this whole sense of building a sense of belonging with leaders could also help in the breaking down of silos. Any thoughts just from a Tanner Health lens there?
Yeah, that's, a great call out. And I think Tanner, because we are a smaller community healthcare system, we have the luxury of knowing a lot of our team, right? I think as a leader, I know the directors and the VPs, and we're a tight knit community. But I think even if you're in a larger system, that ability to build relationships outside of your own sphere of influence is what then allows you to grow. And we do like each other, but there are always teammates that you're like, we just kind of don't get along, or we don't see it. But I think when you have security in who you are and what value you bring to the organization, and you're willing to share information and share best practice, that builds that trust and breaks down those silos. And I think the most effective leaders realize that the more they try to learn and lean into their peers for support and expertise, the more they're going to grow. The more you kind of double down on this is mine, or this is what I know, or this is where I feel comfortable, I think you're going to find your influence shrinking.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
and and
2 and 3 heads are always better than 1.
That's right. That's right. And healthcare is a team sport, right? We all know that when we get those diverse teams together, those multidisciplinary teams, we all win. We all do better.
Absolutely. So let's take it from sort of the higher level, the organization, the presentation that we saw at ACHE, down to a more personal level, down to the Corrin McCloskey level there as well. Your leadership has taken you not only from being active within ACHE, being at Congress, to being very active in the American College of Cardiology, which some might say is still to this day sort of a male dominated world. I'd love for you to tell me what it's done for you professional development wise and what you would tell other female cardiovascular service line leaders based on your experience. Let's dive a little bit into more of the Corinne lens, if we could.
Yeah, well, I've had a pretty remarkable career, and I've had a lot of people that I could thank for that. I think one thing I've been very fortunate to have is a lot of female and male, not only mentors, but true sponsors. And I'm not sure if this is something you've talked a lot about on your podcast or in your work, Dan, but I think a sponsor is that person that's going to put your name out in the room, that's going to talk well behind your back, that's really going to elevate and lift you. And I think sometimes women have a harder time with that. Somehow we've bought into the lie that maybe there's not enough room for all of us, or we feel more protective of our career or our trajectory. And I've been extremely fortunate to have great examples of this within the American College of Healthcare, within the American College of Cardiology, where you have these leaders that are willing to put your name forth, to elevate you, to encourage you, not just to mentor you, but truly give you opportunity. And so, one of the things I've been able to do in the American College of Cardiology is participate on some of their subcommittees and leadership committees as an administrator. And I'll tell you, sometimes what I've found is there's so much tension between our administrative leadership and our physician leadership. And sometimes you see physicians go and get an MBA or try to learn more about the business side. my advice to anyone that's in a non-clinical role, an administrative role that doesn't have a clinical background, is get involved in these medical colleges because that's where the science is, it's where the physicians are, it's where you get to be a part of their ecosystem and what's valuable to them. And so the American College of Cardiology has given me tremendous opportunity to use my voice as an administrator and really connect with their mission. And I think for women specifically within healthcare, as an administrator, the higher up you go, the more male dominated it can be. But I've always said, I don't really lean into that as a differentiation. I try to continue to do the things we've already talked about, surround myself with peers I trust, with leaders who are going to elevate me, and find ways to bring value to the organization, the teams. And that's what really continues to propel you on your journey.
I was sort of reminded of that in one of your recent LinkedIn posts. I enjoyed you were presenting, I think it was CV Transforum where you were presenting, and you had a physician come up to you and say, "This is the presentation I've been waiting for at conferences like this." And so what I hear you say is whether it's in an official dyad environment or just that co-leadership environment, again, it kind of comes back to that relationship building, trust building between someone that they might refer to as the suit and the clinical leadership there. Any thoughts on why that physician would have said something like that after you presented?
Yes, he was so kind. And, you never really know what you're going to get after a presentation. But he was so kind. He came up and he said, "Oh my gosh, change management is something we've got to be talking about more. Thank you so much. This is the presentation I've been waiting for." And he was just very kind in saying that I think as a physician leader, he sees some of these same gaps, right? And how passionate he is about working with his administrative leader in a true team to help make change happen. And, I think you get varying degrees of perspective from different administrators on how much they want to involve their clinical partners. And I just strongly believe in my core that we're not going to be successful in healthcare unless we're closer aligned and not a matter of just buy in, but true co creation. And so I think my physicians are just as responsible for change management as I am as an administrator, but we have to equip them for that. We have to help them understand the different areas of change management and how to work together on a team.
Got it. Well, and let's switch gears somewhat a little bit because we've been talking about your work and your depth in the ACC, the American College of Cardiology, but your own career has expanded significantly over the last several years. So you not only lead the cardiovascular service line, but you also now lead the oncology service line. So as someone that is widening her span and sort of wearing more than one hat, like so many folks in healthcare find themselves doing. For those that want to expand their scope, for leaders that are listening to the podcast to say, I think I'm ready for the next challenge or the next advance in my career. Let's start with kind of the words of warning, if you will. What are some mistakes that you see folks make as they begin that trajectory towards expanding their leadership?
Well, you know what they say, Dan, the reward for good work is more work. So I've just been given the opportunity to expand my work and my impact here. But no, all joking aside, I think that it's a tremendous amount of trust that the organizations put in me to allow me to help lead in our oncology space. I think one of the areas where people fall into the trap is that expert trap of, well, I don't have deep subject matter expertise in this area.
Yeah.
I don't have deep subject matter expertise in oncology, but what I do have is an incredible management team that does. And so my role as their leader is to elevate them and help connect them to areas within the organization. One of my managers, just a couple months in, said, I have had more visibility and connectivity within the organization in the last 6 months than I've had in years. And so I think maybe a common trap is this, well, I don't have the expertise. I don't know if I can step into this. But having confidence, going back to that confidence in I have the right skills to be able to elevate this team. And the further up you go in an organization, knowing it's a lot less about what I know and it's about how I connect the teams and support the individuals that need to do this work.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I would say is that technical expertise part. The other thing is I think sometimes leaders get so fixated on the execution or the result of their work, they miss the how. And I think a lot of times it's right thing, wrong way. And if you're trying to get at something and you're alienating people, there's a trail of bodies in your wake, right? Like this is not really setting you up for success. Um, One of my favorite quotes is, failure is an orphan, but success has many parents, right? Sometimes when you're doing something well, everyone wants to jump in and help take credit for it. But when something's not going well, it's nobody's responsibility, right? So it goes back again to that value. Where am I adding value and supporting other leaders and other teams? And the more you do that, the more you add value and create connectivity instead of just focusing on the result. I think that's where you grow your influence and really expand as a leader.
That's really good. I think that's great advice to have folks be thinking about sort of, my growth trajectory in a much more holistic way instead of just that direct line, which might end up leaving the wake of bodies if I'm not focused on all the right things along the way. I'm going to come back to your ACHE presentation for, kind of the last couple of questions. I was fresh off a presentation with my co-author, Dr. Catherine Meese, in our new book, Genfluence, and this whole notion of the multi-generational workforce dynamic there. And that's not, again, just the front line, because as we think about it, we've got 4 generations on any given day working at the nurse's station, working in imaging, working in plant operations, facilities, and engineering there as well. But it also applies to leadership. And I've always said one of my favorite parts of attending Congress is the time to spend with early careerists and to look at the actual sheer numbers of the percent of ACHE membership that's represented by early careerists. I always like every once in a while to be able to find somebody on the podcast to sort of help me with what do we talk to these early careerists about? So as you think about the industry, and if I'm an early careerist listening to the podcast, what kind of leaders does healthcare need more of in the next, decade or so? How would our industry be best served if we could sort of paint the perfect picture of the next leader?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think I'm probably firmly within that mid-career bracket now, which gives me a really unique perspective and being able to work with, incredibly talented people that have laid the groundwork ahead of me. And then also to kind of look and see those that are coming behind me and those that I can help support and mentor and sponsor. Um, I think this might be a little bit of kind of a fresh take here. I think we need less MBAs and more communication majors, honestly, or more people with a public health background, or a community involvement background. And I'm a little biased because that's my background is public health and communication. But the truth is, I think the leader that healthcare needs today is less about I'm here to solve the problems of healthcare and more about I'm here to build the team to help us find solutions, right? And I think that culture focused, people focused leader is what healthcare needs. And I'm really excited about our future. I've seen this be more of a trend, more of a theme in some of our younger leaders and some of our newer, staff and physicians. And I think that's something else that's really exciting is the physicians I'm interacting with, they have a different view of their staff and of their systems and of the way they do their work. I think it is more people centered. And I think that that too is going to carry us into the future as we have more physician leaders or clinical leaders that are interested in leading teams and want to develop these skills.
Awesome. Awesome. Um, I love when podcast guests share some of their favorite quotes. One of mine has always been, in essence, leaders are dealers in hope. And that's the
Mm.
last question I'd like to ask you. As you think of the future of healthcare leadership, what gives you the most hope?
Gosh, well, when you're just saying favorite quotes, I'm not going to be able to quote the whole thing, but maybe we can put it in show notes or something. But the man in the arena quote, I absolutely love. And it talks about, it's the ones that are doing the work that are failing time and time again, but they're in the arena, right? It's not the critic who counts. It's the person doing the work. And I think healthcare is still a mission driven field. I think it still draws people that want to create change and better humanity. And I think because of that, we just have this opportunity to make sure that we continue to be mission centered as individuals, as teams, as organizations. And I think that continues to fill me with hope. We are all users of healthcare. We all need healthcare. So our own care into the future really depends on those teams and leaders that we're developing today.
That's awesome. A number of things you've said today remind me of this theme that we've sort of happened onto in the last couple of years, and that's rewiring. This is not change for change's sake. It's not about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. If this was a NASCAR race, this is not about swapping out the whole transmission in the middle of the race versus maybe just tightening the lug nuts up so the wheels don't wobble on the operations of healthcare there. But rewiring seems to be one of those ongoing themes that, it's not about a wholesale change in leadership, but it's the subtleties. It's the people first focus there. It's perhaps looking to more outsiders to healthcare to assume some of these leadership roles there. And if you don't mind, a quick shameless plug for a conference that we have coming up called Rewiring Healthcare in Nashville, October 20 and 21 of this year. You can go to rewiringhealthcare.com and register and come join us. And the things that Corinne has talked about throughout the podcast today really pick up on that theme of, not just change for change's sake. If it's working, keep doing whatever you're doing. But if it's not, what are those subtle tweaks and fine tunes that we can put in place there as
I'm planning to be there. It's going to be a great time. I'm
I'd
excited
love to
about
see you in the audience there. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, listen, like I said in the very beginning of this podcast, and now folks know why, I have been looking forward to having you as a guest on the podcast ever since I sat in the audience on that very last day at the very last session of ACHE's Congress. And of course, here we are now, almost in the middle of the year, and we're looking forward to the Congress that's moving into Nashville, Tennessee next year. So we'll look forward to seeing you there as well. Listen, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your words of wisdom with our audience today.
Well, thank you, Dan. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
All right. Well, once again, thanks for joining us, our podcast. We'll look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Have a great day.
If you would like free resources and access to our latest books, articles, and industry insights, visit our website at healthcareplussg.com. We hope you'll join us next time as we continue our journey to make healthcare better for caregivers, patients, and communities.